Dr. Patel, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rakesh. Good morning to you from San Juan, Puerto Rico.
Good morning. Yeah, first of all, thank you for your time. I know you have been traveling a lot. Still, you found some time for us this morning. So, for our viewers, I just want you to introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Sangiv Patel. I am a general dentist, technically, and I practice in Melbourne, Florida. I've been in private practice in Melbourne, Florida since 1995, so about 30 years. I have very specific niches and passions I love in dentistry, and I think it's the greatest profession ever.
Awesome, like 30 years. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's quite a lot of journey, 3 decades.
It's
So,
actually a little bit longer. My journey actually started as a dental hygienist. So I think my private practice experience actually started in 1989. So about 30, almost 37 years.
wow, almost close to 4 decades.
Yes. Doesn't seem like that long, but it's moved along.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, you are in the private practice, and then I just want to talk about, it was interesting when I was talking to you last week.
Hmm.
You scaled down your practices, like, from three practices to one. So,
Correct.
I was, no, I was fascinated after hearing this. Why did simplifying the model turn out to be your best growth decision?
Actually, it goes further back, Rakesh. So I was speaking at a meeting in Seoul, Korea, and this goes back to about 2009 or 10. And it was the Asian stomatognathia meeting, and I was speaking on occlusion and some other topics. I came back, and there was a comment or review that I received saying that this model works great in your hands, but we're not sure it's going to be replicable in other clinicians' hands. So I took that two ways. As one, a little taken aback, because what I still perceive today is what I do is just normal everyday general dentistry. But to hear that, it was taken back, like, have I created something that's not practical? And so I took it as a reality check and as a challenge that I needed to kind of test in other people's hands how this model works. So I acquired several more practices far away from me. One was about 50 miles, one was about 80 miles from where I practice currently. Ran that experiment, so to speak. That experiment taught me quite a bit, actually, that yes, you can make money as an entrepreneur with multiple locations, and that's the real model in this day and age, it seems, with the DSOs and the rise of all of the corporate dentistry. And the model does work, but it requires a clinician to have a certain level of commitment. And so I did that for a couple of years, and even today, the associate doctors that were involved with me, eventually I sold the practices to them, and I scaled back because I just found that that experiment works in other people's hands. It gave me the confidence that I needed to refine some things, and also at the same breath understand clearly that this model isn't really designed for everybody. It's designed for somebody who has a real passion for changing people's lives. And that is a commitment that's different than a model that may be financially driven. And the financial benefits in my model are a benefit of what you do and who you are versus a target you reach, because that's what you're chasing. Two different perspectives. And so scaling back was, in reality, I call it going back to my laboratory to a certain degree, in the sense of how I've set up the practice and how it's structured. And yes, it simplified the management challenges. It simplified the number of doctors that worked for me and with me and the staff. And it built some long-term relationships in the industry, where I practice in the Central Florida community. So there were benefits, but simplifying has helped my model of the innovative smile become a lot more precise, a lot more accurate. It was worthwhile. It really was worthwhile to scale back, and I'm glad I expanded, but I'm also really glad I contracted back to where the model needs my energy, not so much anything else. At this stage in my life, I guess it's prudent for me, and I feel a sense of responsibility to kind of share what I have developed and learned to the dental community to help the patients get a higher standard of care.
Oh, that's really a different kind of approach. And on the same line, I just want to ask you that you have built enough authority that patients travel internationally to see you. So,
Yes.
with with single independent office. Then what actually creates that level of trust without large corporate structures?
There's an old saying, Rakesh, and maybe you're familiar with it. Who you are speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you say. If you meditate on that thought or that quotation, it's how I sort of raised my children when they were younger. It's one of my favorite sayings as I go through life. And I think it's the other question that comes that's of great relevance is what is better? What is greater? And I'll ask you the question, purpose or intent? Can you rank those for me?
It's tough, right? Like you should have the right intent with the right purpose. So like 50-50 goes,
Yeah,
they goes
and that
hand in
you're right.
hand.
And I had to meditate on that quite significantly for a number of years to get a clarity. And I got a clarity. To me, purpose is always higher. You see,
Okay.
you can, when I say the word intention, like say, Rakesh, you have an intention to get to know me better through this podcast. But what was your purpose? And so you and I can intend to do something. And Dr. Wayne Dyer has, I think, one of the best definitions of intention. Intention is not something you do, it's something you connect to. And that connection comes from the energy flow of your purpose. So if your purpose is clear, your vision is clear. If your vision is clear, then your intentions are something you just connect to. And that whole process of who you are becomes the evolution of where things end up.
Okay, I have to meditate on my purpose and intent now. Definitely, it was deep thought though. Like I was caught off guard with that question, but still, it's a good question that I have to meditate on.
Yeah, I mean, you have a young agency from a career perspective, and having clarity in your purpose will help to get the intentions of you and your team and your vision a lot more connected, a lot less friction, you'll see. And some of the things and decisions that we make in that journey become a lot more confident.
Well, yeah, definitely. So while I was talking with you during our first conversation, the one thing that stood out for me was your principles as laws of nature versus values that
Yes,
shift with the trends. So I just want you to go a little bit deeper into that because
of course.
that's a different
That
perspective, and then I just want you to talk about it.
So to me, it has, well, in this day and age, it also has social applications, but within dentistry, I'm sure, and it's true in every industry, there are trends and fads that we go through cycles and what's popular now and what isn't. And if you look at the definition of a value, it's the degree of importance that society gives to a certain noun, a thing, a place, an idea, whatever it happens to be. Like, heck, when I was younger, there were no cell phones. They were lucky to have landline phones in India. And so now the social value to a certain degree, now honesty, your social economic status was one of the check marks was, do you have a phone landline at home? Those were the days, right? It's a social value. But the principle was what? Communication. It was a method of communication. So principles are laws of nature that you can't break, but you can be broken against them. And that dichotomy and clarity becomes one of the stepping stones to that purpose-driven process. The whole model of the innovative smile has 5 tenets. First, it's not that we want to look, everybody claims in their industry to do the best they can for their clients. That's just normal hearsay. What is my criteria for innovative smile? Well, the first piece of the puzzle happens to be how do you exceed the patient's expectations? And within that process, how do you exceed the clinician's or my own expectations? First criteria. Well, to do that, you've got to be able to do risk management. And in my world, there's 2 types of risk management. Well, more than 2, 3. The first one happens to be what everybody thinks about instantly is medical legal. You do something wrong and some attorney's going to sue you because you did something wrong or you harmed something or something didn't turn out right. And sure, that's a valid concern. The second is clinical risk. And the third is moral or ethical risk. Are you making those 3 risk assessments properly? Well, to do that, you really have to understand the patient's expectations. And the patient's expectations can be clarified, and I talked about this at length yesterday in the course. The model of the inner smile has one core principle that really cannot be disturbed. We spend a tremendous amount of time diagnosing in detail in the fourth dimension of physics, which is time and motion, because it's travel through time and motion that generates longevity. And my vision is very clear for the clinical practice. It is to guide with professionalism, to provide an abundance of innovative, evidence-based treatments that regenerates patients' life and vitality. Now, we do this with a team that is synergistic, that is happy, that is dynamic, and that gets its gratitude from satisfied patients. So that's our vision. It's very clear. But that vision is very clearly based on the fact that values versus principles, the principle-driven process. That vision, it matters in human health because as you exceed risk management. So as we talk about risk management, that moral obligation you have to the patient is, and I say this quite honestly, yes, we're entrepreneurs, and yes, we are a small business in the technical sense, and yes, there's big businesses in medicine, dentistry. Fine. At what level of entrepreneurship do you want to be participating in that business side? Because as a clinician, as a doctor, you took an oath not to be a billionaire, per se, clinically speaking. You took an oath to take care of that patient, improve their life. That's your first priority. Second risk was medical legal. Well, there's two types of risk. There's the medical legal and there's the ethical. If you exceed the ethical tolerances of any system, your medical legal risk almost always is a nil, doesn't exist. And so we've built a system of care that is evidence-based, and it's based not only on what I see as a doctor or the patient says, so what's subjective, what's symptomatic, and we want to objectify that. So now we have subjective data, we have objective data. How do those two collaborate? How do we distill down to identifying every condition that is in my system, the stomatognathic system, as we call it, the chewing mechanism of the body, and identify those conditions and only treat those conditions that are affecting the patient's disability or quality of life. So that's risk management. From that, now that you're able to manage the risk and understand the risk tolerances, you can engineer a treatment plan, much like an architect develops a blueprint. And that blueprint is then refined before it goes to the general contractor. Same process here. The process in dentistry is that you are the architect and you are the general contractor. You are the man or woman or team that is going to regenerate that patient's dental construction. Then there are some essential technologies that we have to employ in my model. And so when I started clinic, everything was in this two axis, the X and Y axis, kind of flat plane. We had film x-rays, paper charts. That was the whole system. Time went along and we got digital, and I got involved in CAD/CAM dentistry in the CEREC 2 days. And even the graphics were just like an Etch-a-Sketch. You know what an Etch-a-Sketch is? It was a little toy that you drew lines with, and it was in the X and Y axis. And then we obviously had 3D graphics developed a few years later with Microsoft Windows and things, and we got into the 3D world. And dentistry's been sort of stuck in the 3D world for the last quarter century, from scanning systems to cone beam CAT scans to implant design software. And we're finally starting to move into that fourth dimension visually in diagnostics with systems like ModJaw and systems like Shining Dental's new product line coming out. But there are only several really true diagnostic tests that have been around forever, in my opinion, at least through my career, that have fourth dimension implications, because the three dimensions are the X, Y, and Z axis. The fourth dimension, as I mentioned earlier, is travel through time and motion. And whether you drive your car or you chew the teeth I've produced for you, it has to travel through time and motion to generate longevity. And so our criteria is simple, as I stated: least invasive, most predictable way to get the result the patient needs, and how do you make it last? So we use a system called a BioPack, which is a time and motion measurement of a patient's TMJ function. We use surface EMGs to do real live time and motion tests of their muscles of mastication, and then we use T-scan bite analysis to do real time and motion studies of, force vectors when the teeth come together. We combine that with the 3D data, and now I've got an instant second opinion. Does the patient have myofascial pain and headaches? Are their joints clicking and popping? Are they excessively wearing? Do they have bacteria? Now we're able to take all the visuals, all the video charting, all of that data, and synergize a treatment plan in the fourth dimension. And those are the essential technologies. But the real secret sauce, which dentistry really needs to accept, especially with the rise in implantology, is physics-based dentistry and physics-based diagnosis. And when you combine that, you apply those particular principles, then you truly have what I call is the fourth dimension evidence-based integrated solution to digital dentistry. Beyond that, you will have success, but you will not be significant in the patient's life long term. And so that new patient experience for us is a little different than the typical practice. Yes, we're a general practice, but we have that standard that's a little bit different.
Yeah, now that's really a different perspective on the patient experience. So let me call this whole thought process as a framework that that helps you to think through every decision that you take. So as you said, technology is emerging, and then it is emerging rapidly now more than ever. So with this framework of thought process, with this school of thought, how are you able to decide which technology you have to use in this era?
I think the best perspective in my life I've heard is from the author Jim Collins. Are you familiar with him?
Yes, yes.
Good to great. I wrote an article for a magazine that doesn't exist anymore about 20 years ago called Contemporary Aesthetics. And it was an article on the CEREC system. And I was explaining when you acquire new technology, how do you gauge it? For instance, we give the Wright brothers credit for developing the airplane, but it was actually Mr. Dumont who had the first practical flight. The Wright brothers had to use a catapult and spring motor to launch their plane. Mr. Dumont had the first flight that actually took off on its own and landed on its own. So there's that gap. That gap gives us the insight. To me, technology has to have three things. And in Jim Collins' world, technology is not the creator of momentum, it is the accelerator. In other words, you and I can get from here and where you're at to Japan by swimming, by flying, by trying to walk, by trying to drive. Now, how fast, how safely, how effectively you get there depends on the technology you choose. But if your vision isn't clear that you want to get to Japan and you just have a technology, you'll end up in the wrong process. Okay. The other author that will give you great insight is Mr. Stephen Covey, who's no longer with us. But his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he talks about the principle of the compass and the clock. And the compass means that he talks about a story where there's a gentleman who's on a business meeting and he's in a rush, gets on the plane, he lands, he starts driving, he drives for several hours. Long story short, he misses the meeting. He's dejected, he calls his wife, says, "What happened?" Because I don't know. I just don't know. This map thing got me confused. I don't know. Well, he realizes he's in the city of, let's say, Chicago, but he's driving around with a map of Detroit. He was so focused on getting somewhere, he didn't have a clarity on where he was supposed to go. The compass was not correct. So technology has to have three criteria in my world. First, does it have integrity? The definition of integrity is, does it make something or someone whole? Two, will it be easy to use and apply? And three, is it versatile? And the first criteria is that, does it help me speed up my model, or is it going to take me away from my model? See, my journey into the Innovative Smile actually began with single visit dentistry. Now it's single visit teeth in a day is the paradigm. Single visit dentistry was something I pursued because I had to differentiate myself as a private practice when I first started my practice in Florida. It started with the practice of, let's say, endodontics. Many endodontic procedures were done in multiple appointments at the time, but we started using technology like magnification, digital apex locators, and other things to help us get that infection or inflammation situation under control faster so we could resolve that issue. That's why I got involved in CEREC dentistry. Same reason, single visit dentistry. So that initial push of innovations that we had to do internally to improve our quality, our standards, to compete on that level of saying, well, how do we service that patient better? Because if you're a patient, you don't want to drive across town twice, get injected twice, and go through the pain and suffering when it can be done once, right? And so that process of innovation, evolution to improve the patient's quality of life also has to take into consideration their quality of life first. And so the technology you employ has to have that specific criteria. You know, you can reference my website, and all those articles are still there to download if you're interested in reading the details on that. And so I think that that perspective, it's a disciplined thought that leads to disciplined action, and it's in the action compartment that technology applies. Everything else before it has to be present. I don't really know if you're familiar with Jim's model of the whole good to great process. If you're not, I'll give you a quick explanation.
Yes, please.
So that book was actually written not as an author. He was at Stanford and ran a business institute, and he was doing a research project on the 15 greatest companies in US stock market history. And his research is what that book really is. It was nothing that he expected. It's used by almost every Fortune 500 company today for their executives. I think it's a great reference point for almost every medical and dental system in the world today. I think it gives you a great framework of how you approach things administratively, executively, as a leader and CEO of your organization. So the first, what he found, the 15 greatest companies in the book Good to Great, the first criteria is what he called disciplined people. And disciplined people started with what's called leadership. And he called it level 5 leadership. So, for instance, level 4 leadership would be Rakesh has a vision for his company, Orange. And that vision is your vision. And then you recruit team members and resources and spend capital to get that vision accomplished. Where level 5 leadership is that, but with 2 specific ingredients: to lead with humility and internal will. In other words, you know internally that that's your vision, but you're not out there driving everybody. The vision is driving everybody. So then the second principle is first who, then what. In other words, he talks about a principle where you get a bunch of people on the bus and you set them down, then you decide who's the best driver, who's the conductor, who's the navigator, who's the safety officer, who's going to be the mechanic. And those roles are dependent on the person's not skill level, but who the person is as a human being. That's disciplined people. From it, he talks about the Hedgehog principle, which is very popular. So I'm sure you've seen the diagrams of the 3 circles that intersect, right? 1, 2, then there's a little circle in the middle. That actually is called the Hedgehog principle. And it's part of the discipline thought. 3 questions Jim Collins proposes. 1, what are you most passionate about? So I'm going to propose that question to you, Rakesh. What are you most passionate about?
Right now, helping businesses, especially the healthcare businesses, that's my passion every day. That's what I do.
So let me ask you a more technical question.
Yeah.
What does the word passion mean?
For me, the passion means that drives me right from the time I wake up, and then that gives me a purpose throughout the day, and then by the time I go to bed, that gives me a satisfaction of what I have done throughout the day. That's what passion for me is.
Okay. If you look at the etymology, the origin of the word passion and its Greek root, it means to suffer. What are you willing to suffer the most for is the question Mr. Collins is asking us.
Well,
First circle. Okay. For me today, and it's been that way for the last 20 some years, it's the innovative smile. The second question he asks is, what can you be the best in the world at? And it's not an ego statement. It's an internal understanding of your knowledge, your skills, your attitude. The third question is, how do you monetize that? How do you generate revenue from those 2? Because if you don't have the energy, you can't fulfill that middle circle. And when those 3 things intersect, he calls it transcending the curse of competency. That's the goal. That's the Hedgehog principle. I call it going from being successful to being significant. You propose that question, how am I attracting patients internationally? We don't market internationally. I have one website, and the last year we've developed this professional teaching website because the demand is there, and I'm still learning all that stuff. But at the same time, to me, it's all organic. It's a who you are principle, right? And so that's the disciplined people, disciplined thought equation. Then you start to get what's called a breakthrough from that point forward, and you start to apply these principles, and the technology part of it comes at the very end of the 6-step process. And that's the good to great process. And that's how these companies that dominate the US stock market were built, by CEOs that weren't there for themselves, they were there for their purpose. Can you give me examples of several in your lifetime that you can recognize like that?
I mean, the purpose of the company?
CEOs that live level 5 leadership.
Well, the first CEO that I noticed while I was in my MBA course was the Microsoft's CEO. Then the new then CEO was the Satya Nadella. When he came on
Yeah.
board, the stock was plumbing, and then I was like, and then when he came, I was keen. I was a student back then, management student. I was watching his interview, and then he said, "No, what is your vision?" And then I was like, okay, I was just curious, right? I was a management student, and I was curious to listen to his vision. And then he said, mobile first, cloud first. That's it. And then I was stumbled, and I was like, okay, that's it. I was expecting maybe 10, 15 minutes of
No.
explanation of it and everything.
Yeah.
And then after that, I started following him closely, and then I understood, we can connect the dots only by looking back, as famous Steve Jobs said. And then I started connecting all the dots that he was doing, and then today, it is one of the most successful company. And then it is still tied back to his mobile first and cloud first. Now they're doing great with the cloud business, and then he opened up all the Microsoft apps to all now iOS and the Android apps and everywhere. So now that's the most thing that I admire from that particular
Yeah.
CEO.
Yeah. And it's all about clarity and purpose. That's the point of it. And
Yes,
he has an internal will. He's not out there banging drums. He has that internal clarity and will, and he's humble. He's not,
yes,
if you look at Ratan Tata's history, same thing. He
yeah,
he was not a big ego statement, but he changed the world, right? And that is clarity. Um, Look, dentistry is one of the roles I play. I also play a role of a CEO. I play a role of an author, an educator, a father, a grandfather. All these roles that we play, the clarity has to be there. And my purpose is very clear, it's to change lives. And that comes from my early childhood. And that's a different story. But that becomes part of the criteria is that, and I don't really care what faith you are, but God said, you want to change other people's lives, you have to change your own life first. And there are things that happen in everybody's lives that are beyond your control, but you've got to learn how to manage those particular things. And that process of learning how to adapt and grow is critical. And it's critical to the evolution of your vision. And that process applies to the Innovative Smile, it applies to Microsoft, it applies to what Elon Musk is doing, all those things. And we can see when Elon Musk got involved politically, and his ego got in front of him, the humbleness went away, and it damaged him and his company's reputation for several years. Now he's had to regain all that back by his will. And that dichotomy will continue, and that's why I find clarity in Mr. Collins' distillation of why those companies that were great had these level 5 leaders that you never knew who they were. They built great companies, they transitioned them. Satya Nadella only got a position because Steve Ballmer was there, and he only has a position because Bill Gates started the process. And Bill Gates only has a product line because Steve Jobs invented the Windows. And so, you mentioned Satya Nadella, but Satya Nadella only has a platform because Steve Ballmer set up that platform. And Steve Ballmer set up the platform because he was friends and cohort with Bill Gates. And Bill Gates only has Microsoft because Steve Jobs is the one who invented Windows, and Bill Gates honestly stole it from him, right? And so we have to consider the process along the way and look at historically what happens. And historically what happens is that the originators typically don't get rewarded really heavily for the invention. Like Steve Jobs never got the credit nor did he get the revenue streams for the Windows product. He did for the other iPhone and everything else that came along, but that invention was really his. And that there's a great book that was written by, I shouldn't call it a great book, but very necessary dry read, and it's called The Innovator's Dilemma. So if you're an innovator in any industry, it was a professor of Harvard that wrote it. He really talks in stages about what challenges innovators face. And I think it's a good read if you're into innovations and into any industry that is trying to lead in that department. And I think we have to stop thinking about innovation strictly as technology and digital technology. Critical point. There's innovations in every part of every industry. We look at surgery, what I do, we have surgical instruments get better. We have biologics, our biology, and we're going away from synthetics to organics to a lot of materials that are there. Pharmaceutical, the same thing. We're going from pharmaceuticals to genomics, and so that transition of technology within your field of play matters, and understanding how you'll be rewarded for your innovations and your dedication matters, because it's not always about money. It never should be. Money is being rich. Wealthy is a distribution for all of your life's foundations and watching them grow, right? Envision like you've got a bunch of ponds, and one says, heck, Rakesh loves cars, so he's got a pond, he wants 7 Lamborghinis. He's got another pond where he's spiritual, he's got that. Then he's got another pond where he's got family, and he's got another pond where he wants to travel, and he's got another pond where he wants to write books, another pond where he wants to change, and all these things. Well, how do you fill all those ponds? Well, you don't fill them by putting a hose in every one at a time. You put a drop in every one every day in the moment. One of my isms that I use all the time, and it's something that I've created because I've never heard anybody else talk about it, is that we are human beings, not human havings. Do you know what that means?
No, the thought is too deep. I just want you to go deeper into it. I just want everyone to hear your thought on your.
It's clear. Look, as a biologist, as a species, we are human beings. Human, us, beings. Be means what? Ing. It's the present tense. You in the present. Human in the present tense. That's a little translation. Yet, if you have children, what do you tell them if they don't behave? Be something to have something. It's the Pavlov reaction. So why are we asking a species that's supposed to live in the now? And if you're a Hindu, that's your whole principle, live in the now. But you're asking things to behave. Differentiation takes you from the 4th dimension back down to the 3rd to the 2nd. It's these sort of thoughts that go in my mind that I look at things, I look at failures, and we all have failures, whether it's clinical, financial, business, relationships. Look at those failures and you start to say, did that failure occur because of this? To me, it always stems back to these 4 or 5 points I've raised. And one of them is, are we in the moment? Am I in the moment with Rakesh right now and forgetting the rest of the world? Or am I thinking about, oh boy, how many people are going to watch this podcast? Do they really care who I am? That doesn't matter. What matters is that we sow the seeds, and then whoever, even if it reaches one individual, if we are able to impact and improve their need, we've achieved our purpose. And so being in the moment, staying relative, like I can't be in a surgery worried about what India's cricket team is doing. I have to be in that moment doing that, because if I hit a nerve, I hit a blood vessel, I miss the bone, it's a problem.
Right.
And so being in the moment, it's a clarity that I think that matters, even as an executive, as a CEO, as a clinician, whatever your role happens to be in your industry, I think that matters.
Well, that's really a too deep thought process. With that same thought process, I just want to ask you one more question. I couldn't control myself
Sure.
here. Burnout. I want you to talk about the burnout with the same thought process. How do you see the burnout? Because you said you wear many hats as a dentist, right?
Burnout happens because of laws of nature. Repetition. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever looked, are you a gardener? You love nature, right?
I do.
Right? And so as we look at burnout occurs because I've never seen a tree or a plant in my life that's either got bigger, greener leaves with deeper roots and moist sand and nice sunlight, or it's turning brown and dying. There's no in between. One of the laws of nature is that either you're growing or you're dying. The law of conservation of energy, to help you understand it a different way. Energy can't be created, nor can it be destroyed, correct?
Right.
Energy is measurable. Thing that we have to understand the third law of physics is that in order to have energy, you must do work. And in order to do work, you must have energy. It's the flywheel. If we are at a burnout stage, that burnout typically is at the second tier to me, the mind. So you have the body, the mind, and the intellect. And the burnout typically is an emotional burnout because there's a block. Either you have a physical issue, your back may hurt, your eyes are bad, you may have another disease process that's leading to that fatigue physically and causing you emotional situations and is burning you out, not because you don't enjoy it, but because, let's say, you're in healthcare consultancy and digital marketing, right? And you invest all of this time, effort into, let's say, 15 different clients. And all of those clients are achieving the results you want. But then at some point, Rakesh says, boy, I want to do this for 1,500 clients. And I can do this. And you start to push, and you push with the same systems to achieve that greater goal. And it doesn't occur. And now what do you have? No growth, and you're starting to die. And that's burnout. It's the use of energy in the wrong direction. And that's why that purpose, see, the purpose I have is 2 words: change lives. There's no end to it. No matter what role you and I play, there's no end to it. It forces me, when my children were younger, being educated, there are challenges as a parent and as a child. And so their criteria was very, very, very simple. It still is today. I used to tell them, all you have to do in life is to be one step better than your father. Now, that does 2 things, Rakesh. First, it gives them a target. And when I say this, most people think, oh, they want to be a doctor, they want to be this, they want to be that. Not really important. What was more important is the second part. It forced me to keep elevating my game so it would never catch up. Make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Like my younger one wanted to be, when he was a little 3-year-old boy, he wanted to be a garbage man because he loved garbage trucks. My vision as a father would be, you know what? You want to go into environmental engineering, get a PhD, and do something and change the world. You see the dichotomy?
Yeah.
A child and a father think differently. And so as he got older, he wanted to be an NBA player. Well, we know the capacity. And so you have to start looking at purposes and changing lives. And how do you change your own children's life? Well, the way I could change their life is I had to change, right? And so it's that whole clarity of purpose to me. That's what it makes every time, is within the practice and outside the practice, same thing. It's that's the gist of the synopsis.
Now, that's a deep thought. I think anyone who is listening to this definitely take a pause and then take the notes and then I'll do it after this, definitely. So I know you went deep with the burnout and the whole process. Now, on the other side, success, defining success, and then in our first interaction, you were just talking about.
Yeah, success is measurable. That's the end of the story. Success is measurable. Okay. Burnout is also measurable. Both are measurable.
Okay.
Let me give you an example. In between 2004 till about 2010, I was heavy on the lecture circuit. I was taking continuing education classes. I was teaching them. I was taking them. I was practicing with 3 practices. And there came a point, there was burnout. Why was the burnout there? Because all of these things and ideas and energy and resources I was expounding were not giving me measurable results for my purpose. I wasn't changing lives because I wasn't changing my own life. Sell to multiple locations. I took a sabbatical from teaching on the podium. I only stopped doing my own courses, but only taught by invitation only. I started to draw back in and focus on things for each of those ponds that matter. And then success became measurable. Joy went up on a daily basis. My marriage with my wife, Sangeeta, and all of that relationship got better. My relationship with my children got better. The practice that I had focused on and had grown to lost some of its essence because I had expanded too fast. Went back to being what I call the laboratory, which was the true joy was. And so I think when you have a purpose and a clarity about what your purpose is, mine wasn't to build 37 practices and sell them to a big corporate and make $1 billion. And I have friends that have done that. That's their purpose. They're great at business and numbers, and they're impacting access to care differently. I'm impacting quality of care and longevity. So you got to have that bandwidth to say, this is where I'm at. And in the future, how will I be able to influence those? Because I don't know if you know, but I am the immediate past president for the American Academy of Implant Dentistry Southeast District, but I also sit on the board of trustees. And late last year, I was invited to be one of the privileged people to be on the strategic planning board for their future vision. And we have a meeting in San Diego next week. I'm flying to for it. We were on a conference call looking at a research firm's data. And in the United States, currently 23% of the industry's private practices are owned by corporate America. However you define them, DSOs, group practices, but corporate America. The prediction, according to research data, is that in the next decade, 80+% will be owned by corporate America. And corporate America's success is measurable. How? Look at the stock market. That's their measurement of success. I said earlier, my criteria isn't success, it's how to be significant. You want a real life example, look at Elon Musk. He's successful, or is he significant? He's significant, correct? And Einstein was significant. Mahatma Gandhi was significant.
Yeah, so it's Ratan Tata.
Yeah, and so the significance, if that's what you're chasing, great. Because the truth of it is, if 80% of the industry is owned by Wall Street, will the patients know names of any of these Wall Street companies? No. But the significant people they will remember in their life. And to me, that's why I took the oath of dentistry and how to improve lives. And the system works in multiple hands. It's better if I keep engineering the system and improving upon it. So knowing the fact that 80% will be owned by corporate America, what if the innovative smile is developed and they can do a plug and play into their system? And now what happens? You ever hear the concept of win-win?
Yeah.
Right? You know where that's from, right?
Yeah.
It's from Stephen Covey. It's the first molecule stepping stone of what's called a public victory. And so what if we do a win-win with the innovative smile, and whether you're a small private practice or a multi-billion-dollar corporation, this process is going to improve the quality of your care, improve your systems, and improve your profitability. So that's the direction of the entrepreneurship that's going now. Is because, look, after 37 years, I think I've done almost every procedure you can imagine in dentistry. And God willing, and God's capacity is still with me, I'm still doing pretty good with it. I can only change a specific number of lives in X number of hours I spent chairside. But if I can take this system of care and develop it and share it, then I'm able to change clinicians. Now I've got an army of people developed to do what they need to do. And that is the impact of where I'm headed.
You raised a critical point of the patient experience here.
Yes.
So most of the times, we work with other doctors and then help the clinics get more patients through online marketing. So the thing is, the last touch point here is the experience with the doctor for the patient. The first touch point is always either the receptionist, or even before that, they hear about you from someone else, or they see an ad or something else. Well, if a doctor is the last touch point and then you have a great vision, how do you ensure that, right from the first touch point till the patient reaches out to you, the experience stays the same?
This comes from your arena, Rakesh. What is the difference between marketing and branding?
So the brand is always about the perception. Everyone, if I ask you about a brand name, like if I ask you to, what is Apple for you? You say, what is your perception about Apple? And then I say, what is my perception about Apple? And then marketing is something, I call it as an engine that creates that perception. That's everyday's job of marketing, is to create that perception through using the consistence of either it can be the words, the actions of the messages that we send to the public, so that they don't put their own words into their own mind. We put the words that now about our own brand. That's how I define marketing and branding.
Two thoughts. Uh, Branding is the vision of the practice. Marketing is how you bring people to see if they're a match for that vision. Marketing is short-term, branding is long-term. Okay.
Right.
Amy Morgan did this exercise with us, and she's the CEO of the Pride Institute, which is one of the oldest dental consulting firms in the world. Dr. Jim Pride passed away. He was from my dental school, but he had developed a methodology for private practices back in the 70s and 80s that was renowned all through the US. I remember doing this exercise, and we can do it together no matter what business it is, and we were all asked to close our eyes. And so everybody closed their eyes, and you can do this while I'm doing this if you want. And we were all asked to think of an image or a picture of what our ideal scenario would be for our practice and our patient. What does that look like? And given an X number of minutes to kind of just think about and conjure up a picture in your mind's eye. And she said, open your eyes. So we did. And this was a point of clarity for me. One doctor, there's about 7 of us, said, I see my patient sitting on the beach with her new teeth and finally able to eat breakfast on the beach. One's father had tears in his eyes at his daughter's wedding because he finally had new smile because the dentist had fixed it. So they were life-changing sort of things. You want to guess what I said when they came along to me?
I'm excited to hear.
I said the atom. The atom.
What?
That was, yes. Because in my mind's eye, that patient is the nucleus. All the protons, electrons, all that stuff that rotates around are the systems of care that we have to develop. The new patient experience, the facility, the technology, the compassion, the clarity, what happens in emergency. All those systems have to circulate with that patient in the center. That was the moment of clarity for the Innovative Smile and how to start building those systems. Even today, if you walk into my living room, I've had custom chandeliers made, 3 of them, that kind of have that same shape to keep reminding me that it's always to the foundation that we have to get back to. So the new patient experience, yes, you're right. When you're marketing, you want to drive patients to your phone, or if you have an automated appointment system or a virtual, whatever system you're using, it's great. The thing that I think that frustrates people in general is, why am I not getting that high number of new patients? And the bigger question is, the patients aren't coming because they don't need your service or the type of service you're offering. That's the reality. That's the truth. But the truth hurts. And sometimes you can be the best marketer, but if the vision and branding isn't clear, in the sense of not the perception, but the execution of that perception. You see, human beings aren't stupid. Peter Dawson used to tell me, the average intelligent human being just wants a healthy mouth. That means that the average human being knows what they want. They have the same sense as you do. You're no better. I'm no worse. And they can sense from the moment they pick up the energy if it's compatible with them or not. Stick your tongue into an outlet. You'll see what kind of compatibility you have. Not very good. And so that becomes the thing. Look, we don't market anywhere in the world, but my brand has reached it somehow, organically. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
We don't attract 500 new patients a month. We couldn't handle that. What we do attract organically are patients who have been through dentistry, who've had significant complications and failures, who've done their research and now are looking for that solution that meets the criteria that we have to offer. How do they find us? Sometimes they'll do the internet and they'll call the manufacturer of specific equipment and tests and say, who has your equipment? I've had patients say, well, who is your best clinician out of that user? And the manufacturers will send me patients. And so it's not like I ask for patients, but the patients, you have to give them credit. And you have to be honest in saying that, look, as an entrepreneur, what do? You risk ideas and capital to meet a void in the market And if the void is met, you become successful and significant. This is no different. For a fee-for-service practice, it's no different. There was a great article written in Fortune magazine years ago, and it talks about the friction-free economy, which is the big gig word, right? Friction-free everything. And they gave an example how back then Tesla's car was being ridiculed because they were talking about Tesla's catching on fire from the batteries hitting the ground, and there was going to be a total recall of all the cars, and this is about 2010 or 11, and it was going to destroy Tesla. You know what Tesla did? They sent a software update to raise the suspension by 3 inches, and there was never a recall.
Ah, okay. I never knew that.
I'll send you the article. That article you have to read because it talks about, it interviewed every CEO of almost every significant, from Vinay Khosla to Bill Gates to Steve Jobs, and what their future visions held. And that article is very concise, and it helps you understand that all of these visionary leaders were purpose driven. So back to your match of branding and things. Because the process of what we do involves not just, look, dentistry, at least in the United States, I'm sure to a certain extent to where a lot of your clients may be in India or somewhere abroad, it's a treatment-based science. In other words, not many dentists get really well or properly compensated for their diagnostic skills or time. In the US, the DSOs market an exam, x-ray, and cleaning in 1 hour for $59. The guy who washes my car charges more than that an hour. How do you expect a qualified doctor with high levels of education to address all the complex biology by looking at your mouth, taking a couple of pictures, going home and saying, okay, I have a plan for you? To build a home or a factory, you have civil engineers, structural engineers, you have architects, you have contractors, you have a team. So to process that takes time. And if your clients are really honest about where their purpose is, and it's not value, it's not teeth in a day, because that's the hot commodity, it's not implants in a day. And I'll be honest, I see a lot of medical tourism. I see a lot of US people of NRIs who go to India and they go to other countries to have procedures done because it's cheaper. They come back with 10x the complications. And who's suffering?
The
That
patient.
because it was not a match for the brand. They were looking at instant gratification versus longevity. They were looking at a brand and the perception of a brand. And it's not that the brand they chose was Apple. It was a Chinese knockoff, but it had close to an Apple symbol. And they thought they were buying an Apple product with an ecosystem that was like Apple's. And so you will have to probably serve as some sort of business coach to a lot of your clients, saying, let's talk about your vision and purpose. And then let's build a marketing funnel, as you guys call it now, I think, a funnel, to help attract those specific criteria. And I find that most marketing firms, and I've used many over the years, overpromise and underdeliver because they truly don't understand the client's needs and they want instant gratification. And to build a brand, like I said in the first sentence, it's a long-term thing. It's not a short-term. Marketing, yes, you want to fill the chair time, market a specific technique. Like if you're a restaurant, market your pani puri. If you're in America, market your hamburger. But your level of your chef is that when they come in for that one item, if you overwhelm them with a level 5 experience, where are they going to go, right? And that becomes a standard. Exceed the patient's expectations and your expectations. That's the first tenet. And that's what branding and marketing should be built around. All the technical things, how you do it, I have no clue, Rakesh. I have no idea how you guys do it.
I'm, yeah, I'm not
And
getting
to be
it.
honest with you, I'm the least bit interested because that's not my passion. It's not my purpose, right? And
Right.
and so you have to build a team of people that is their purpose and their passion, and that I think is my distillation after many years of trying to do marketing on my own, trying to hire sub things and things out this way, is that you have to find a like-minded individual in that industry, and then you run parallels with it, and then you'll see exponential changes.
Perfect. So on the same line, like, the you're a doctor, you're a CEO, and then there is a gap in between you becoming a doctor and then you becoming a CEO. I just want to talk about that gap here
Yeah,
during your early days. And also, you might have seen many younger residents and slash doctors who has gone through
sure.
that gap. So I just want you to like talk about your experience and also your experiences of seeing other doctors going through that gap and fulfilling that.
I was fortunate. I had many different occupations before I became a doctor. When I came to the US, we were not in a financial good situation, as many immigrants are not. And we used to actually, I started working at the age of 12. We used to make these electronic circuit parts at home because there's somebody in the Indian community who owned a factory and wanted to make parts. And my mom and dad and my brother and I used to work on the weekends making parts. That was my first job. As time went on, I became a teenager and I had a neighbor who had a landscaping and snow plowing business in the city of Chicago and lived 4 doors away, and I was my best friend's father. And so we used to go assist him, and we got paid that way. Then I got a job at a Burger King. Okay. Then I got a job working at a grocery store, and I was doing cashier and bagging and moving carts and produce. And the point is, I went through many, many transitions. And that taught me one valuable lesson: hard work, how to relate to all different people at all different levels. And that's the process of where we are. How about CEO? Well, my father owned several small businesses. There weren't huge businesses, and my father was an average business person, a small shop, and revenues to run the household, but it never was a significant business. But I had experience in inventory and running those stores when I was a young man as a teenager. So as that went on, then I became a dental hygienist. And I worked through a temporary agency through those 4 years while I was in dental school to supplement income and pay bills. And I was also teaching at Loyola at the same time. And I had the benefit of working at, and I counted about 84 practices over that 4 year period as a temporary hygienist. What was the benefit? It took me years to understand that the benefit was, it was like a paid internship, Rakesh. I was able to go behind the scenes for a day or 2 days and look at different practice sizes, different practice visions, different facilities, different management systems, and what succeeded, what didn't succeed. So I was already being prepared for the entrepreneurial stages at different experiences. The first, I explained those different jobs. That's a technician. The second is management. The third was when I started to get on my journey and I met some real exceptional leaders in the field of dentistry that helped me understand their vision, and I bought into it. And then I started reading a lot of books and talking to people about developing business because that's one of my interests, is the business side of things. And from it came the distillation. For me, it was never like I want to open a practice. It was just an evolution of things that had to occur. I moved to Florida. I was working as an associate with an equity position, and I decided that their vision, my vision wasn't aligning. And within 5 months, I bought a practice and started my own vision. It's always been never chase the money, chase the purpose, fulfill the purpose, and the money will chase you. It's almost like the Three Idiots story is true. It really is. It really is.
Definitely, that's a great movie.
And so uh, the business side of it, but you can't also be that passive. If I were to recommend one book that I think every private practice starting clinician, and even some better clinicians really need to read, is by Michael Gerber. It's called The E Myth. And in it, he describes and tells a story about Sarah, who's a pie maker, whose grandmother made pies. And that pie recipe is amazing. So she decides to make a bakery. She opens a bakery and is very, very popular. And so she says, if I'm making X amount of pies, making X amount of money, if I have multiple locations, I can double or triple the money that I'm making. She opens a second pie shop. And that moment is what he calls the entrepreneurial seizure. You're a technician and you want to be an entrepreneur. And he talks about all of the turbulence, all of the challenges that Sarah faces, because now she's, instead of working one, she's working two, making the pies, buying the ingredients, washing it, being the cashier, being the one who cleans and mops. Now she's got double, and she burned. The burnout question It's when you have that entrepreneurial seizure because you don't have management. There are three hats in business. You're either an entrepreneur, you're a manager, or you're a technician. Here's how the landscape in medicine dentistry has changed. I'm a dentist. I have a son who's a nephrologist, another son who's an orthodontist. My daughter-in-law is a pediatric dentist. My other daughter-in-law is a doctor of pharmacy. So we have clinicians in the family. In the 80s, we had a lot of autonomy as doctors. It was much like being in the NBA or the NFL or in the cricket league, and you were a highly paid technician, right?
Right.
Making tons of money because you had a technical skill. Software engineers that are now being driven out by AI, right? Right. So those things are technical things. Manager is a different hat, and entrepreneur is a different hat. That's why DSOs are buying out dentistry currently, because the entrepreneurial side is so weak. Because what you are questioning is, what do you need to do to develop your business acumen to be able to make things thrive? And you have to put a dedicated effort into the entrepreneurial side. And the E-Myth will give you clarity on which hat you're going to wear. If you are clear on where your Hedgehog principle is, right? If you're a great entrepreneur and you're most passionate about building multiple locations, and you're most passionate about saying that, how do I impact life? Well, it's access to care. As many people as I can, even if the quality of care is a little bit lower, I don't care. I want to serve as many, and I can make money doing it. That's your Hedgehog. And that same applies to if you're a highly paid technician. My model sort of merges the two in the sense saying you have the option. You can be a highly paid technician because the Inner Smile will help you build a moat, because it's what I call a tier 2, tier 3 practice model. I can open in the middle of 50 DSOs, not that they do bad dentistry, but the level of care they're able to provide with young clinicians and their volume of dentistry and what I call commodity of dentistry inherently leads to complications and failures. That's just the way life is. When those occur, if you set yourself up to treat those particular tier 2 level issues and tier 3 level issues, you've got a moat around your business. You aren't marketing and branding yourself as, I'm going to sell my service for $59. Your marketing yourself as, if you've got these kind of complications and problems, I'm your solution. You see the difference?
Right.
And so that business acumen also means you got to know what do they call them? KPIs are important. I had developed my own KPIs 30 years ago, and I don't do a whole lot of analytics. I never share numbers with my staff or my team. I don't think it's important enough for them to be worrying about their purpose shouldn't be how much, and I'm not a believer in what I call is incentive-based salary model, because I think it's morally not correct to try to sell things in the healthcare industry to patients who don't really understand what they're buying sometimes. I compensate my staff well, they're well treated, they're doing really well for the right reasons, and they get successful and significant if the patients get relief and the practice grows. So that is my control as CEO. There's KPIs that I've developed that we monitor, me in the sense of myself and whoever is involved in that decision tree, monthly. It takes us about 5 minutes, and we know the health. It's like looking at the blood pressure, and you know where to kind of manipulate things with medicines, where you need to exercise more, control your diet. That sort of process has to occur. It's a constant sort of thing. But you need to focus on where your greatest 80-20 rule is. Where's your ROI for the type of vision you have, and where do you focus, right? For instance, at this point in my journey, it's to pull away more from being chairside and more into this development side, because my plane is landing, right? I'm almost 60 years old, and I've got to be clear about where, it's that transition of I can either transition my one practice, or I can transition the practice and also have this system of care that I think it has impact and value, and I've tested and proven it and offer it to everybody, saying, look, yeah, you have one option as a DSO, you have one option as a private practice, but either option, if you apply this, we can elevate both of your standards significantly. And so to do that, as an entrepreneur, I've got to draw back and take some risks and say, look, it may flop. Who knows? The market may not want anything I'm doing, but that's the risk I'm willing to take, and you have to be able to be accepting of that. That whole process talked about the tree dying and growing. It's a transition process. And so dental school doesn't teach you that. Dental school doesn't teach you that. I would encourage that that every individual, whether in dentistry or medicine, that they go ahead and really give some honest education themselves to learn. There's a software called Quicken. I don't know if you're familiar. QuickBooks is one. Quicken is a personal
Yeah,
finance
yeah,
software.
QuickBooks.
And years ago, we had utilized, and we still use it, and they have what's called a lifetime planner in it. And I would urge anybody who's interested to purchase that software, no matter what age, married, single, divorced, it doesn't really matter, and go through that lifetime planner. This is strictly an observation on personal finances, but if you don't have a clarity in your personal finances, you won't have a clarity in your business finances. Doing your lifetime planner, which takes into account family size, financial responsibility, at what time, it asks you all those questions and it gives you a treatment plan, a rough treatment plan about what you need to accomplish in your business to meet the threshold minimum. So you know what your risk tolerance is. Again, treatment planning your business life and how to gauge that. And from that particular point, developing an annual business plan that knows that it's going to bring in that minimum threshold to meet that lifetime plan. And then you can take all the risk you want on the other parameters. And when you fall, it's okay because you've got your safety net there. You see, the purpose of your education, the only purpose of education is to tell my kids, it's your safety net. We're all going to fall in life. The guy walking on the high wire is going to fall. What's going to save his life? It's that safety net. The amount of education, technical education, the higher the education, the higher the safety margin. The lower the safety margin. And we know this is true historically through generations and thousands of years. Education's only purpose isn't that I have a degree. Do you have a degree that is going to be able to monetize, going to be able to do something with that safety net? And that financial lifetime plan is one of the critical steps in making sure you achieve your business goals with managed risk, not total risk, managed risk. So that's the one pearl.
Well, definitely everyone should know their degree of risk so that they can create their own safety net and then
But
play by that.
mathematically, measurably mathematically, I'm talking down to the penny that you will know.
Yes,
And
just black and white, no
that
gray area.
confidence, yeah, because that confidence only comes from competence. And when you have that competence, then as an entrepreneur, you can make aggressive decisions like, why would I decide to spend over $100,000 25 years ago on something that was called experimental dentistry on a CEREC 2 machine? Because I had the financial bandwidth that I kept myself. So do that. My wife, myself, my two children, my parents, and my sister-in-law, my wife's younger sister, lived in a 2-bedroom apartment for 5 years. We didn't have a lifestyle increase. We had an investment increase in the risk of this site. We kept that number purposely low. We were funding our future children's education, funding our future home, funding other things, but not acquiring them. You see, you've got to be able to have that black and white clarity. And that as an entrepreneur will give you that freedom to say, okay, I can take that risk. And that's how I've achieved through Darwin economics, as I call it, because India was built on Darwin economics, right? It isn't until the last, I want to say 10, 15 years, where if you want to buy a home in India, it was all cash. Now there's some financing options, but it wasn't. It was always a Darwin, the survival of the fittest economically. And as we go from that to credit and leveraged economics, the risks are much higher. Sure, the returns can be higher, but the risks are, and I'm not a risk averse person. I'm a risk manager. And to me, to manage my responsibility and all those roles I'm playing is more important than what I do as a dentist. First priority. And if I
Yeah,
manage
definitely.
those adequately, then this part of the life can do what it needs to do.
On the same note, during our first conversation, you were talking about patients' degree of bearing the pain. I vaguely remember that concept, but still, I just want you to talk about it. Uh, that was really, I was surprised hearing that from you.
Remind me what exactly the pain conversation was a little bit.
You said while you were teaching or while even to the patients, you said, right now in 2025, 26, the degree of pain bearing has significantly reduced. And then you're just talking about, we have to
Yeah,
address that
so what
point.
happens is that, pain is a subjective thing, and there's two parts to pain. There's the nociception or the pain itself, and then there's the reaction to pain. So let me give you a direct example. I'm a dentist. You've broken a tooth. You come to see me, and you're in pain. So that's the nociception. That's the pain itself. How you react to the pain is up to you. Second part of it. Okay. If I start drilling on your tooth to fix it without any anesthetic, I've made the pain worse. If I give you anesthetic, which hurts a little bit, but then it takes away the perception of pain, you're comfortable. A quick summary of pain, right? In my world, it's all about the trigeminal nerve, the fifth cranial nerve, because it innervates everything in my world. It also controls the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. It's part of migraine headaches. It's part of sleep apnea. It's part of the endocrine release of cortisol. It's one of the most important nerves in the body. It innervates every tooth in your mouth, you see. And pain is something that is that second tier emotional thing that you talk about. Burnout, that's a type of pain. You talk about toothache, that's a type. And how you manage pain matters. You see, the principle is very simple. Set up the stage or the environment so the body can heal itself and get the hell out of the way. In other words, minimize the use of procedures, of chemicals, and materials as much as possible. So what I said earlier, identify the conditions, and only treat those conditions that impact the disability. Pain is one of those disabilities. And so attacking the TMJ problems, attacking the myofascial pain, attacking the nerve problems as a first priority, because now you've done several things. As the patient feels better, you've gained their trust. And trust is the only commodity that matters in healthcare. You cannot sell a patient a full mouth rehab. They have to request it from you because they trust you enough to do that. When do they trust you? When you've gotten them out of pain and they've got a chance to get to know you and who you are. Speak so loudly. I can't hear what you say. You can't market teeth in a day when they don't know who's flying that airplane. No matter how you resonate, hopefully some of these cliches or sayings that I've developed are starting to make a little more sense how they kind of intertwine back and forth all the time. The pain is your number one criteria. I'll give you an example. I was leaving for Puerto Rico 2 days ago, and I had a couple of procedures to finish in the morning before I caught my flight. And there's a patient who I'd been taking care of for almost 30 years, and she had a massive car accident before I met her, and I had to do a full mouth rehabilitation 21 years ago. And it's 21 years later, and she's starting to have a couple of issues develop, and we have to address those. And they're not easy solutions because from the trauma from the previous accident, there's some complications and compromises that we have to manage. And she's a very demanding patient. And without an appointment, she shows up to the front desk on a day where I'm short on time and requests to see me immediately. So my staff is concerned something's gone wrong. He's got to catch a flight, and now we have patient X here. And so they put her in the consult room, and my receptionist is with me. And I said, "Is everything okay? Can I help you?" She goes, "Everything is great. I just was driving by. I stopped in to just say thank you and give you a hug, and I'm leaving." That was it. That was the
That's
whole
it.
conversation. She gave me a hug and she left. When you
So,
solve pain problems, that's the wealth you develop. That is, you can't earn enough money to buy that.
yeah, that's
That is the reward of being a doctor
definitely,
that
that's a
does
fulfilling
and lives
one.
on purpose, right? And so those are things that motivate you, that inspire you. And motivation is external. Inspiration is internal. You know what that means, right?
Right,
If you bring
definitely.
the word inspiration means you're in spirit, internally out. Motivation is that it's that whole I want a reward. It's that whole process of what I was telling you earlier is purpose versus intent.
Right. Awesome. That's really a good story. Um, so I just want to jump onto something else, which is more on the risk assessment and then your preparation. And obviously, there is a high
Yeah.
stakes in decision making, whatever you do every day. And
hmm
and then you're preparing to climb 19,000 foot volcano, right?
Yes, I'm leaving a week from Tuesday to go to Ecuador, and my friend Dr. Rajiv Patel and I are going to attempt to summit Cotopaxi in Ecuador.
Awesome. So I just want to draw a parallel. Even for that, you have to
Yes,
prepare. There is risk assessment, and then it's a decision
yes.
making in high stakes. So now, how does it help you in both situations?
It's all about living in the now. All of my inspirations are drawn from nature. If you walk in my home, there's no artwork. It's all about
Oh,
nature. It's all windows that look onto the nature. There's nothing. There's not one picture hanging in a whole house.
wow.
I think that living in the now is really how you have to live. There's no other substitute. So hiking has been a passion. It helps me understand. There's a app that I started using. It's called All Trails, and it's mapped out every trail in the world, and it's almost like a GPS, much like your car's GPS, but for hiking. It gives you elevations and terrain and how long and and there's all that data's in there. So that's much like a surgical plan. It's a risk assessment, how long it's going to take, what you're going to face. You have the weathers, you have other hikers' feedback who've accomplished that. So you've got all that data point. And then when you actually do the hike, it's like being in the live surgery from a guided surgery perspective. You've done your plan, but now you've got to do the surgery. And you really learn that, wait a minute, the topography here was not explained in the GPS. And then the slope here is dangerous. There's more. And so knowing in the moment, because you can't focus on anything else but the moment. And whether I end up summiting Cotopaxi or not is irrelevant. It is the process. It's that journey that's more important. So assessing the risk is important. I've been watching the weather every day. I have a meeting on Tuesday with my friend Rajiv to look at all the gear that we're going to be needing and all that other stuff. We're reviewing all the safety measures. What medications are we taking with us? Who is going to be our guide? What equipment are we going to need to chain ourselves with? How do we get the ice picks and ice axes and all that stuff back? And so, yeah, it's all of those particular steps. And all those steps are universal. And it's all about, well, how do I exceed my expectations when I get up there, right? How do I assess the risk? Well, we're assessing it right now. When I get there, if it's pouring rain, what are we going to do? And so those risks will have to be assessed again. Do we have a plan? Yes, we've got a guide we've hired. We've got the equipment checklist, and we've got all the treatment plan. What technologies? Well, we've got all trails. We've got satellite views. We've got another piece of equipment we have is a live, if you go to the Himalayas, it's a Sherpa. We have a guide to help us with that particular, it's a geologist we're taking with us. And so the physics of it don't change. We still have to climb that volcano. We still have to go through the iceberg, and we still have to get there. And so, yeah, hiking is fantastic. If you guys are interested, I'll tell you more about it. We're actually supporting 5 charities, everything from the American Academy of Implant Dentistry's foundation to the Children's Hunger Project. The money we're raising, 100% is going to charity from this hike. So the expedition, that's being paid for by myself and my friend Rajiv. So none of the money being raised is not a penny's gone. 100% of the money that people are donating is going right to the charities. Why do we do this? We're calling it climb for a cause, right? It's all about changing lives. We're going to change our lives by getting an internal win that we did something different. We did something special. We challenged ourselves. We're growing in our knowledge, in our skills, in our attitude, in our things. So that's our reward. But we're changing homeless people's lives, battered women's lives. We're changing veterans' lives. We're giving money to scholarship funds. We're feeding hungry children. So we're impacting different processes. And so that's the win-win. And certainly I'll share the link with you if people are interested on your podcast to join us on the journey. It starts February 3rd. And hopefully you'll be engaged and support the causes.
Yeah, definitely. We'll share all the links, and it will be a continuous work on your side as well. So we'll definitely share all those NGOs links for the charities. That's really great work, and then I believe it would be fun for you too to do this.
Yeah, speaking on that, we have another project we're doing in July in Pueblo, Mexico, with Dr. Worley and his Worley Implant Immersion Center. We did the first, what's called the All-Star Charity Course last July, where myself and Dr. Worley organized the event. And we had about 10 implantologists, and we trained 19 surgeons to do some advanced complicated surgeries and procedures. And we raised about $210,000 for a local orphanage down there and the AID Foundation in the Southern District. And so giving back is important because that's how we recycle the energy. It's always the time, effort, energy, and money needed. I've done it all my life. I think my first significant one was in Rishikesh at the
Oh,
Burnout ashram with
okay.
Muniji, who wrote. Yeah, so I did my first camp with him in 1999. Helped establish a dental clinic there, and so it's something I believe strongly in.
Definitely. Next time you visit Rishikesh, I'll definitely catch up with you.
Okay, it's an amazing place.
Yeah,
Are you
yeah,
close to
definitely
there?
it is. No, but now I can take
Yeah,
a flight, couple of hours, I'll be
yeah.
there. Uh,
Okay, that'd
yeah,
be great.
anywhere in India is not far.
No, it's a short flight.
It's a short flight, so definitely I can catch up. Uh,
Okay,
so it's great. We spoke about you being dentist, your passion about it, and then you being the CEO, you being the leader, managing the team, and you being the entrepreneur. Spoke about the risk assessment and then the decision making, and then the last part I want to talk about is you being an educator. So
okay,
at some point, now teaching, right? It shifts
yeah,
from personal interest to responsibility. That
yeah,
becomes a huge weight on
yeah.
your shoulders. So when did you feel the transition happen for you as an educator?
The moment I realized that what I was doing in my practice wasn't what was happening in the industry. Specifically, when Zurich dentistry first came along, it was looked upon as subpar, subclinical dentistry. But I wasn't achieving those results. I was getting really good results, to the point I was teaching for Serona. And there were complications I was getting, but they were blaming them on the cements and the chemistry and the bond and all this stuff. And I was finding it only on a subset of patients who had a predisposition to underlying TMJ and myofascial pain syndromes. And hence, that led to the instrumentation that I started acquiring more and more different types to understand the depth of the pathology. And it's much like R&D. That's what I went into R&D mode. And as I went into the R&D mode, I realized I was breaking a lot of the camping. So dentistry has camps that they believe in, and every industry does, right? For instance, in dentistry, we have what's called the occlusion camp. We have a joint camp like the Dawson Pankey camp. We have the neuromuscular camp. They believe the muscles are everything, neuromuscular, and LVI Institute. And so dentists are trained and they believe that philosophy is the correct religion. And to me, it's much more than that. It's the spirituality. It is the patient's physiology that dictates the final plan, diagnosis, and treatment. So all the literature that's out there, all those things, look, you can have a perspective on something you see in life, and I can have one. You and I can find 1,000 articles and reference points to argue our position. What is the correct one is what meets the need for that situation. So all these metrics that I've developed take into account the standards, but then refine them into the patient's physiology to customize controlled engineered treatments. Once I realized that that was something I was doing and nobody else was doing it to the degree I was, I sort of felt like, boy, if I don't share this, then the standard of care will not elevate. And it went from being, look, it's true. When I first started lecturing for Srona and being at what's called a KOL, key opinion leader for multiple companies, it was a big ego boost. Look, you're this young man, you're on these big podiums, you're being compensated for your travel, and you're being get all the perks, and you're becoming famous, and fame has a problem. But that wore off pretty quickly for me. When I started to realize that, and I hate to use the word, but I did, and I have, is that I couldn't be a prostitute for any particular manufacturer to sell their products and services. I had to be true to my vision of what I had discovered and keep developing that. And then I would work with those products and services that fit into my model, and that would be the extent of it. And that was the moment of clarity that yeah, it's not about being famous. It's not about making a lot of money. There's a significant responsibility that comes with what you know. And if you know that it's valuable in the sense of not only society, but it's principle based value, then you fear nothing and you keep developing that.
Perfect. I think that's the guiding principle that you just gave for the younger doctors. So, just before closing this, is there anything else that you want to give to the audience that I
No,
haven't asked
it's
you
been
about?
it's been a fun conversation. I haven't had this much diversity in, of conversations in a while. So thank you. It was fun.
It's my pleasure, and I really appreciate you taking this time. I know your calendar is packed with many events, and
Yes,
definitely I'm looking forward to hear from you in the future. Um,
sure.
so thank you, Dr. Patel, for your
Yeah,
time today.
absolutely, Rakesh. Thank you for your help. It was great. Take care.